Hello. Boy, is it raining out. And I know some of you are dealing with that. It's pouring down rain. I guess that's why they invented brimmed hats, right? My name's Joe Martin. I'm the pastor at First Baptist Church in Toledo, Washington. I can hear my stream down below roaring, trying to get a fire going here in the cabin. It's good to be back and get to see you again. I've missed being with you. I want to talk as we begin to get back into the book of Luke. We're going verse by verse through the book of Luke. And so, I want to talk to you today as we move into this new year about Jesus calls. The call of Jesus Christ on the disciple. And I'm going to read the passage to you, and then I'm going to go back over and got a little hat hair going on there. I'm going to read the passage, and then I'm going to go back over it with you. We'll talk a little bit more about it. It was at this time that he went off to the mountain to pray, and he spent the whole night in prayer to God. And when the day came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also named as apostles. Simon, whom he also called Peter, and Andrew his brother, and James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot, Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. We see in the call of Jesus, they were disciples. And then he called them out to a specific a title that we came to know to be called an apostle. It literally means to be sent out. Now, we'll talk more about this, but an apostle was both an office that was unique to the 12 and was also a calling. And so it's used in different ways in the scripture. But we see that Jesus calls in a very specific way. First of all, he calls prayerfully. This is in Luke chapter 6, verses 12 through 16. He calls prayerfully. Remember, verse 12. One of those days, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. Now, Jesus sought the Father's will. And though Jesus was fully God in the flesh, he laid aside the constant use of his divine attributes of knowing everything all the time as he lived out his life as a human being on earth. So in his perfect humanity, he prayed for the Father's will and direction. Remember, it says in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7, during the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from what he suffered. This is from Hebrews chapter 5, verses 7 and 8. We see this is true throughout the life of Jesus, not just here in the getting direction as to the selection of his disciples, the call of these disciples. We see this even in the garden. In Luke 22:41, he withdrew a stone's throw beyond them and knelt down and prayed, and Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. I've often thought that if the perfect Son of God and the perfect Son of Man needed to pray for direction, how much more do I need to pray for direction? How much more do you need to pray for direction? A lot of you are right there today. You're like, what should I do? Or who should I get? Or where should I go? This is really important. So Jesus calls prayerfully. But Jesus calls personally. When the morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated as apostles: Simon, whom he named Peter, his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Simon, who was called the Zealot, Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. He calls them by name. The individual mattered in this case, the individual purpose. You notice that it is God. It is God in this case through Jesus Christ who calls these individuals. And it's God who will call you. It's not your mama. It's not your daddy or the church. The old saying, the old Southern saying about young preachers was they were mama called and papa sent. In other words, their mama wanted them to be a preacher and their papa sent them off to school. That's not how it works. And it's interesting that God, in his personal call on an individual's life, is just that, very personal to them. He makes it known to you. And he knew them because he spent time with them. And he knew them and he called them accordingly, soul to soul. He knew what he was going to do with their lives. And they were a very, very different group of people. You would have never bunched them together. As a matter of fact, this group of people you wouldn't find in the average modern church. They were too politically different. In other words, you had a zealot. He would be of the ultimate conservative. And then you had Matthew, who was a tax gatherer. He was a individual who was basically a businessman, very wealthy. He would be considered very, very liberal, very, very secular. Simon the Zealot would have been part of one of those groups that was so radicalized and given to violence to achieve their political ends. And yet Jesus chose them. He knew them. He knew how Simon, who he later called Peter the Rock, and he knew Andrew, and he knew these individuals, what they were like. He called them accordingly. They were a diverse group. As I said, zealots and tax gatherers that cooperated with the Romans. There were tempters. Remember? Get behind me, Satan, for you care more about the things of man than the things of God. Even the best of us, and in the best of them, could sometimes be used by the enemy to try and detract Jesus from his mission on earth. There were boatmen, like those fishermen, and there were betrayers, like Judas. He even knew the one who would betray him. And yet he gave him every chance. He gave him every opportunity to turn to him. He knows you too. He knows what you're going through. He knows all about your life. He knows where you come from. He knows the mistakes you've made. He knows the blunders. He knows the things that you've said. He knows that your relationships haven't all worked out. He knows that you haven't lived up to your own standards or anybody else's, and yet Jesus calls very personally. He knows not only what you've done, but he knows what's in you. He knows what you can do. And so when he calls you to do something with your life for him, there's no place for excuses. It's okay to ask for clarification. Lord, are you sure? Are you sure you're talking about me? That happened a lot in Scripture. Are you sure you're talking to me? And the third thing is, he called purposefully. He had a purpose. And he has a purpose for calling you for whatever he wants you to do. You see, I've asked the question a few times, and it's always good to ask this question as we head into a new year. What is the meaning of your life? Why on earth are you here for? What is the meaning in the suffering that you've been going through, in the loss, in the struggle that you go through? Some of you feel, maybe you're one of those folks right now, you're thinking, I just don't know that life's worth it. Many, many people have struggled with those moments of suicidal thoughts or dark, dark thoughts. What is the meaning in your life? What's the meaning of this suffering? What's the meaning of this struggle? In terms of the well-worn cultural phrase from Star Trek, what's your prime directive? What is the why of your existence? The why of your life? Well, Jesus lays out their purpose. I mentioned this in the midweek service, so go back and be sure to get that. You can get that on this same site. Just go to the midweek services. Jesus lays out their purpose in another version, in Mark's version of this same incident, Mark 3:14. And he appointed 12 so that they would be with him, and that he could send them out to preach. Mark lays it out very, very concisely, because Mark is all about brevity and quick, getting immediately. That's really one of the themes of that book. We see as we expand on it, as we go through Luke's gospel, right, like we are right now, you see that later on he demonstrates what this is really all about. You see his works of healing and his words of love, and loving your neighbor as yourself, and how to deal with them. I'm just saying that my purpose is that you are to be with me, and then you are to go out and proclaim the reality, express the reality, both in your words and your actions. Like St. Francis one time said, go preach the gospel, and if you need to, say something. In other words, there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of preaching that can get done just by what you do. Loving your neighbor. And don't get me wrong, you have to share that message of hope in Christ Jesus and forgiveness. But if you share that without being what he wants you to be, you'll just fall into that long line of hypocrites that have brought more trouble and discredited the gospel throughout history. You see, what being with Jesus produces is a life that looks like Jesus, that acts like Jesus. Like 1 John 2:6 says, the one who says he abides, the one who says he lives in him or resides in him, the one who says he abides in him ought to himself walk in the same manner as he walks. In other words, you really ought to, you don't want to be cliche, but you really ought to ask yourself, as the old book says, what would Jesus want me to do? Lord, in this internal conversation, not just some principle, but Lord, what would you have me do to reflect you? That old book by Sheldon, In His Steps. You reside with him. He called them to be with him and to proclaim. Those first disciples didn't even need to wonder what their purpose was. They had no need for confusion on the meaning of their lives. And you don't really need to have confusion about it either. They knew that no matter what happened, no matter what took place, God is working through them, like through the difficulties and the persecution and the famines and the plagues that they were living through. He knew that God was working all around him. The God of the universe was still working. He was present and active. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that God causes all things to work together for good. God causes all things to work together for good for those that love God and are called according to his purpose. And what is that purpose? What you're going through right now fits into a purpose. You may not totally understand it, but here's the big purpose. For those he foreknew, he predestined to become conformed to the image of his Son. You see, when you live for him, you proclaim him. You proclaim the life. When you live out the message of his life, the words and the works of his life, it's an amazing thing. Luke 6:30 says, give to everyone who asks of you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is there to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. You see, he's saying love in word and in works. Don't just talk about the cross, live out the cross. And live out the cross in the people that know you best. Not just some people that are maybe you see or you maybe never see again, or someone that you casually run into. It is living it out. Love in word and in work. That's your purpose. And when you do this, it is your meaning in life. You know, maybe the hard thing you're going through right now and how you handle it in a loving and forgiving and gracious way, in a way that points people to Jesus. That's the purpose. We proclaim his life message of love. That's what we do. You know, remember what John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." But there's also, that's that message that Jesus died for you on the cross, that he laid down his life. No greater love has anyone to lay down his life for his friends. But then there's 1 John 3:16, the other John 3:16. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. You see, it's not enough to just talk about the cross. You have to live out the cross by laying down your life for the brethren. This is the call. This is the call, the purposefulness of his call. This is not optional. This is not just for like super saints or the people that are serious about the Lord. This is what it means to live the Christian life. And if you don't live it, you just want a hobby, then maybe the gospel is not the don't drag the Lord into it, because this is the Christian life. Your role may vary from one person to the next because the call is personal. You may not be called to be sent out as a missionary across the world. You may not be called to preach the gospel as a pastor or to work full-time within a church, but you are always called to be with him. You are always called to proclaim him, to proclaim the one who called you out of darkness into his light. You are always called, every single one of you, you and I, we are called to proclaim and practice his love all the time. If you don't do both of these, don't imagine yourself as a disciple of Jesus. If you are not willing to love your enemies, as we'll talk more about in the weeks ahead, if you're not willing to forgive and forgive and forgive, if you're not willing to lay down your life, your issues, your complaints, even if someone has a complaint against you, if you're not willing to lay that down, like Paul said, if any one of you even has a complaint against somebody, a gripe, a criticism, if you're not willing to forgive them as God in Christ Jesus has forgiven you, don't fashion yourself, don't imagine, don't delude, don't deceive yourself, as 1 John says, that you're really following Jesus, that you're his disciple. You say, well, that's really hard. It's costly. Yes, it is costly. You say, well, that could involve a lot of suffering. You know, there's people I don't want to deal with. Yes, that's true. But you know, as I've come into this year, I've thought more and more about this phrase. Don't waste your suffering. Don't waste your suffering on lesser reasons. Be worthy of the suffering that is in your life. Suffer for the sake of love for Christ. Suffer for the sake of loving for Christ, loving others for Christ. Be worthy of your suffering. Don't suffer, as we sometimes do, just because you're sinning. Don't suffer because you're stubborn or you're selfish or you're just willfully stupid about things. You're foolish. Suffer for love without whining, without grumbling or complaining. Do this, for this is your purpose. And this kind of purpose, this kind of love will begin to fill your life with meaning. You won't wonder, I wonder why I'm still here. This is why you're still here. You may be having a hard time right now. Many of us are. Many of us have had a lot of losses, both friends and family. But be worthy of that suffering. You remember Jesus said, men will revile you and persecute you falsely for my sake. Are you suffering for righteousness' sake? Are you long suffering along with people that are kind of difficult? Maybe they're going through a difficult time. Maybe they just need the Lord. Are you suffering for forgiveness' sake or for the sake of grace? If you are, if you choose this path, you are filling your suffering with meaning, not just for nothing. You are filling your life with meaning, and you're also filling your life with the purpose that He called you for. The purpose of Jesus Christ. I know these are difficult things, but you know what? This is the life that He's called us to, and He says this is the life that leads to a life of happiness. Why? Because a meaningful life is a happy life. You know, I'm so grateful that you've taken a few minutes. Now, I'd like to ask you to do something for me. Some of you are either watching this or listening to this on the audio. I'd like you to share it with somebody that you think could really use it right now, that this would really help them. That's part of proclaiming, sharing it in word and in work. I'd also like to ask you to today, ask the Lord as you're close to Him, get close to Him, and ask Him to show you how you can demonstrate love for someone today. There's some next steps on our website that you can respond to, and I'd like to ask you to do that today. You might say, you know, I want to accept Jesus and His purpose for my life. You know what? You will never need to be bored if you will accept Jesus and His purpose for your life. Trust Him as your Lord and Savior. You say, if you respond in that way, we'll get a hold of you and try and explain how you can really be confident of that step of faith. You say, pray that my loving as Christ does will fill my life with meaning. We will pray for you. We meet every week and we pray for everyone who responds. And we'll contact you if you give us a way to. And pray I have God's direction in what I say and do. Yes, we will pray for you. We have to pray for each other, and we need to pray for direction. And I also want to thank so many of you who've been so generous, and some of you have been really wanting to give, and you say, I haven't been able to make it to church, or I haven't felt good with all this other stuff going on. I haven't felt comfortable, but I want to give. You go to our website for tfbc.com or ToledoFirstBaptist.com, and right down there you'll see is one of the options is giving. And many of you are what we call recurring givers. You just set it up and it goes automatically. But you may want to give something extra or something important that God's blessed you in this year. We want to thank you for doing that ahead of time. And it makes it possible for us to not only meet needs and make sure people's real needs get met, but we can continue to do this work. Thank you so much. God bless you.